Thank you. All right. Well, hello and welcome to our December virtual Lunch and Learn program, Workplaces Matter, exploring facts, stories, and resources to support the transgender community. And this is a special conversation that we are having as we look ahead to Transgender Day of Remembrance coming up on the 20th of November. My name is Ryan Wilson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Director of Corporate Relations for the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank Maureen Maori, who is on with us today, our executive administrator. She's helping manage the chat and Zoom room for us. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll try to take them as we go, and then we'll try to leave some time for Q&A at the end. This session is being recorded, and you can find all of the Chamber's past Lunch and Learns on our YouTube page. We have covered a number of topics over the last 2 years. Um, Everything from HIV awareness and prevention to transgender issues. And we have a whole list of new topics we're going to cover next year that we're really excited about. So look for more virtual lunch and learns in the year ahead. For those of you that are not familiar with our chamber is what we said, the organization here in Houston that is at the intersection of business and the LGBT community. And our focus with that is really the economic empowerment for our community and our allies, the better that we all thrive and are able to do better in our personal lives and in our finances, the more we are able to thrive as a community and then also give back to others and support the amazing work that's happening in the region. So we invite you to learn more about our chamber and check out events. We'll be talking about some of those. This event in particular is part of our larger LGBT Workplace Alliance program, which I manage at the Chamber. And those events are focused really on having conversations with large employers in the region. Some of the conversations we have are very unique to companies that have HR departments, that have Pride and LGBTQ resource groups. We do offer a range of chamber events that are open to small businesses. And so today we thought, why don't we open this one up to everybody that's a part of the chamber, whether they're nonprofit, small business, or large employers, just so that everyone can kind of be better informed about the state of where things are for transgender and non-binary people in Texas and beyond. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. I do want to thank our panelists who will be speaking to us today. Mandy Giles, who's the founder of Parents for Trans Youth, Ash Hall, the policy and advocacy strategist on LGBTQIA plus rights for ACLU of Texas. I want to also welcome Stephanie Nicole Leota, who is social services director for the Mantra Center, and then Jeffrey Lawrenson, who is both an ERG leader in the local community and also part of NGLCC's Transgender and Gender Expansive, or TGX program. And our chamber is a affiliate member of the NGLCC, so we're really thankful for both our chamber members who've joined us and Jeffrey for joining us to add your perspectives. Before we jump in, though, I do want to just highlight that the chamber has a bunch of events coming up. So if you want to scan the QR code or check out the link in the chat, we are going to be having our holiday food and supply drive next week. There are three ways to participate. Your company can sponsor the drive itself. You can collect items through your ERG or company, or you can also sign up to volunteer to help Tony's Place sort through the items once they've arrived. So we will be doing all of that in two different ways on the 20th, both in the morning at our third Thursday breakfast and in the afternoon or evening at Eureka Heights, where there will be drag bingo and a rainbow market, and you can drop off your items at either location. Also, wait, there it goes. Our Jingle and Mingle holiday celebration is coming up on Thursday, December 11th. It's one of our larger events of the year, and it's our way of wrapping up and celebrating a year of working together and growing our economic footprint here in Houston as a community. We invite you to sign up. It's free for members, and we invite everyone to join us at Rich's Houston on the 11th. All right, so let's look at the housekeeping out of the way. I want to bring Ash Hall up and have a brief conversation, just kind of helping think about the lay of the land where we're at right now. I reached out to Ash initially because I know there's a lot of uncertainty out there in the community. What laws has Texas passed? What is the federal government doing today? Which court cases have ruled which way? And all of that creates some fear, some uncertainty, and a sense of powerlessness, right? So we wanted to sort of start today's conversation by kind of giving the fact that like knowledge is power, right? So by asking Ash and folks from ACLU to kind of give us a sense of um, first what you're hearing out in the community, and then we'll go through and kind of talk a little bit about where things are when it comes to the policies and laws. So, Ash, what are you hearing and experiencing as you're doing this work across Texas?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. Um, and second, in terms of what we've been hearing, like you said, there is a lot of fear, a lot of heartbreak and sadness, and plenty of rage as well. There are lots of people, especially in the trans community or parents of trans kids, that are weighing their options over whether or not to move out of Texas, which is really difficult because a lot of people have spent their entire lives here and would have to leave other family members to stay safe. We've got a lot of folks who are having crises about having mismatched IDs, thanks to some laws in Texas. We've got certainly a really bad situation at this point in our schools, ranging from bathroom issues to censorship of books, censorship of curriculum, all of it designed to make LGBTQ plus students feel more isolated. And it's largely working, especially since our government decided to ban GSAs at school. So we're seeing a lot of targeting really of LGBTQ plus youth, uh, which is just particularly evil because, of course, as we get older, we develop more coping mechanisms, we gain more knowledge about how to survive, but young people don't come equipped with that knowledge. And so it's especially evil to do something like that to young people. But unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that. And so we know that calls to places like the Trevor Project have gone up quite a bit in the past few years as well.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of things. Let's talk about Texas first, right? So the Texas legislative session happens every 2 years. Not everyone kind of follows the cadence that we have. So we had a session earlier in this year, and so some of those laws that were passed have already taken effect. And one of them, you mentioned, was the Gay Straight Alliance ban, correct? That's newer
Yes.
this year, right? I know
Yes.
there's been schools that have been banning books for several years now, but this sort of specific limitation, what are folks doing about that? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of teachers asking if there's any way that they can support their students without getting into trouble, which is really tricky at this point because, I mean, that law was designed to really crack down on how teachers can support LGBTQ plus students. Oh, the person in the chat, gay straight alliances. So these are generally student-led and run groups that are just designed to support LGBTQ plus students. Usually there's a teacher or a coach or something that sponsors that, and that is no longer allowed in the state. So that's what that is. Um, in
Yeah,
terms
it
of
blows
what,
my mind, because going back to when I was in college, we were fighting to get recognition for our student groups at the college level. And basically, if you have one group of any kind, you can't really censor and sort and ban those. So the Supreme Court's already ruled on this in the past, but now here in Texas, they've got this Texas specific law which basically, I guess they don't care what the Supreme Court's ruled in the past. Texas is going to, push bills like this, but it really has hamstrung or hindered I should say, the ability to talk about LGBT issues in schools these days, right?
Yeah, because it's also a diversity, equity, inclusion ban. And so it also affects BIPOC students, students with different religious affiliations, of course, our own community. The list goes on and on. So this ended up being a huge bill that started out focused specifically on diversity, equity, inclusion, and then just kind of exploded into this huge bill that also was designed to really harm trans students.
Mm.
So we're still seeing a lot of students find ways to meet, sometimes on campus without any sponsorship and sometimes off campus. We see a lot of parents trying to figure out how to be supportive of youth. And I am happy to say that we are suing over this particular law and will be in court in a couple of weeks actually about this. So there's some hope. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, it's pretty bleak out there.
Well, and we'll talk about this later, but that's also where community resources are going to be even more important. If they can't get them at the school, but they can find support out in the community. Uh,
Exactly.
so let's pivot. There were some other laws that passed this year because there was a special session that came out of um, sort of nowhere and really focused heavily on redistricting. But in the background, they snuck in something. Can you talk about the bathroom law that passed and sort of is about to take effect and what you're hearing about that?
Yes. So what's important to know about this bathroom bill, this only applies to government-owned buildings. So that means the vast majority of folks on this call, I'm assuming you don't work in a government building, so your restrooms should be okay. Um, what a lot of government buildings seem to be doing, especially on the local level, is scrambling to get some family restrooms on site, so that there's still a safe way for trans people to be able to use those restrooms. There's also, though, plenty of government buildings like our state capitol that are making no effort to be helpful in this at all. And now it's very, very risky for trans people to use the public restroom, especially in state-owned buildings. So not great. Good thing to know, I guess, is that there's no criminal penalty on this particular law. So there's never going to be a reason to have police there or anything like that. Um, it's designed to punish the building owners, so they would get fined, but the trans person in question would not necessarily face consequences outside of social consequences, which would be harassment, which is the main thing that we are, of course, worried about. But this is part of a pattern of bills that we see across different issue areas where our opponents try to split allies from marginalized communities by punishing allies for providing resources or safe spaces or general help to marginalized communities. So that's what this particular bill does. It does go into effect relatively soon, and we'll be doing a Know Your Rights webinar the day after. So I think that's going to be December 5th. I think I
Right,
have the
sounds
math
about
on that
right.
right.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
let me just highlight two things. One, in the chat, someone brought up a good point. Airports are often government owned.
they
So
are.
it is nice to see that Hobby has some new all gender restrooms. But that is something of a concern if folks are traveling. The convention center in Houston, I believe, is partially owned or, operated by the city or the county. Some of the stadiums and other facilities. So, like, even though we don't necessarily go to the Capitol or work in, say, City Hall, there are places that many of us visit that are government owned or, sort of tied to the sort of government funded. So that would make of concern for some folks. But what
Yeah,
this doesn't do, and I want to kind of re-stress this, is your local restaurants, your local real retail stores. This law does not apply to them. Now, there may be some folks misinterpreting the law to try and apply it, but folks should know that this law is only limited to government buildings, correct?
correct. Yeah, I am concerned about what we'll see next session, but for the time being, it's only government-owned buildings. And unfortunately, yes, that does include airports, and that does pose a challenge, especially for travelers from friendlier states. So that's
True.
something that we're going to figure out as we work on our Know Your Rights work.
Well, speaking of travel, let's talk about federally. We just had a terrible ruling last week. If I remember correctly, it was last week. Everything seems to blur together. I don't know if others feel the same for me. I try to keep up on this, and I do this for a living, and it's hard to keep track of them all. But federally, there have been back and forth on a number of things. Under the current presidential administration, there have been many attacks on trans people in particular, but one includes passports and identity documents. So, can you share what you know about the latest on that?
Yeah, we just got a ruling in favor of the Trump administration on passports. And so at this point, X markers are not available anymore for folks who would like them. Um, you also need to get your documents matched as best as you can. Um, Whether that's your driver's license or birth certificate, like, and your passport, like, there needs to be a match there. Once again, it needs to be sex assigned at birth. So really bad news for the trans community. Um, Not so great if folks did manage to get their passports changed to reflect their gender identity. We're now looking at having to go back and get that corrected. This is part of that bigger crisis that folks are facing, where now we have various IDs that do not match because we got leeway in some places and none in others. So, yeah, really unfortunate decision by the Supreme Court. Um, and I'm not sure what's going to happen next with that, if there will be a lawsuit approaching it from a different angle, or if folks will wait it out until the next presidential administration. I'm not sure where it's going to be going next.
Yeah, understandable. And for those on the call who may not know, sort of know a lot about identification documents, one thing to sort of bring up is just how often people utilize them. It is often required when you go to vote. It's so that might hinder somebody from being able to access their voting rights. I even have to show ID when I get cough medicine at the pharmacy down the street. So sometimes it's simple things like that where if your documents don't match, you might get turned away from a retail facility, from the voting booth, from the airport when you're trying to navigate TSA, right? So this is really a concern for the community right now.
Yeah, and this actually, in part, is a issue in Texas because of a bill that passed in our legislature that said that all IDs have to have sex assigned at birth on them. So
Gotcha.
that's a new law that's been affecting the community. We used to be able to get changes to our IDs, and at this point, all of that is paused.
Mm. So aside from the passport issue, are there any other federal things that you're aware of that we should sort of bring up and sort of acknowledge in this space?
I mean, I think it's nice to acknowledge that the court is not going to be taking up marriage equality again. So that was like a little win for us.
A little,
And
a little sliver of
yeah,
encouragement.
I was really holding my breath on that, so I was pleasantly surprised. So you got to take every win that you can, right? So that's really good news for us. Um, in all of the ways that marriage equality matters, whether that's being with your spouse in the hospital or, figuring out housing together, all of that. So that was good news. Um, I imagine most of you know that the Skirmetti case, which was about having gender affirming care for trans youth, we largely lost that case, unfortunately. Um, but the way that we lost, it's going to be strange to try to explain this. I'll do my best. The way that we lost leaves this particular law open to being challenged again from a different perspective and a different angle. And so, even though we didn't win that case the way that it was argued this time, there is a possibility that we could see another lawsuit on this from somewhere else where it's argued a little bit differently and we may get a different outcome. So there is some hope there, but yeah, in the meantime, very disappointing. And obviously, that care is banned in Texas as well, and has caused a lot of people to have to seek care out of state.
Yeah, I find it's a sort of discouraging in much the same way that when I was younger and we were first fighting marriage equality, many folks had to travel for their wedding certificates. The thought of somebody having to travel just to access healthcare and not just like, oh, I can run down the street and my doctor's 10 minutes away, but literally like get on a plane and have to cross state lines to try and seek care maybe multiple times a year. And like telemedicine can only do so much when you have to actually show up to some of these doctor's appointments and stuff. So the burden that it places on families of trans youth, in particular, is no wonder some folks you mentioned are having to rethink, like, do we want us to live in Texas? And I want to bring that up because many companies we work with, folks relocate here because of jobs. And so if they're trying to evaluate, should I move to Texas? Is it safe for my family here? With some of these laws in place, the answer we have to tell some of them is unfortunately not necessarily safe for you. You may not be able to access some of these rights and benefits, and that can discourage bright, talented folks from coming to our state, and that can hinder the economic forecast for our region. So there is like real impact at that economic level to when these sort of harmful laws gets placed.
Right.
Or
That was our argument for or rather against the original bathroom bill in 2017. We saw the business community come out and really provide a show of force talking about the economic impact if such a law were to pass, and it was very effective.
mm,
Unfortunately, then the lieutenant governor spent the next 4 or so years punishing the business community for doing that. And so now we largely see business avoid these conversations and stay pretty quiet uh, in these fights in the legislature and beyond, which is really disappointing. And I'm hoping at some point, especially like Texas Association of Business, folks like that will rediscover their courage and will join us again in fighting for an environment that's good for all employees and employers.
right. And that's part of why our chamber was formed, and what we try to do on our advocacy side is be one of those voices that sort of pushes for inclusive workplaces, and that's part of what we do here in these workplace alliance events. So let me ask you, since knowledge is power, what are some of the places you refer folks, or what are some of the resources you recommend out there when folks are trying to learn their rights or are trying to find the latest? Do you have any recommendations of organizations to follow or websites to check out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely our own ACLUTX.org. We're constantly updating the website and providing Know Your Rights materials, dates for when our next trainings will be for folks, things like that. There's so many resources we have on that website. It just takes a little perusing, but it's all there. So definitely recommend us. Equality Texas is also a good place to look. Texas Freedom Network, Lambda Legal. Just off the top of my head, these are great organizations to check for information on your rights, for what's going on in different levels of government, where things stand, all of that.
Thank you. All right, so my last question for you, and I'm going to also ask the other panelists when they come on, is what is something right now that is giving you hope? Because we've covered a lot of things that are discouraging right now. So can you give us something that does give you hope?
I mean, it's the sheer amount of people that are finding their voice in this time and using it to protest and stand up for each other, even if it's complete strangers. Um, there's nothing that moves me quite like seeing folks show up to an event where they let me know they've never gone to a protest or they've never gone to a hearing before and they didn't even know that a hearing was happening on an anti-trans bill, but they're outraged by it and they're going to say something about it. And to be doing that at a time where our governments are cracking down on free speech and the right to protest, I'm really moved by the courage that people are showing. And I know that that courage is contagious. And so that gives me a lot of hope. I think it's going to be little acts of courage across the state that will help us get through this really rough time period that we're in. It's going to be courage that's fueled by love.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was remembering as you said that a few years ago I worked with I was actually in Kentucky for one of their lobby days in my previous role at HRC, and two non-binary youth had been taken out of school for the day to do lobby day, and their parents were with them, and we were touring the halls, and they were advocating, and they were learning how to take their government into their hands. And one of them got a text from a classmate that was like, "Oh, you just missed a history quiz." And one of the people in our group was like, "You're here making history. That's fine. You can take a quiz any other day." And and it was so heartwarming because I was thinking I didn't learn how to advocate until my 30s. And here are these teens learning how to walk the halls of their Capitol building. And so these moments where these terrible bills are being introduced have given us the opportunity to mobilize, train, and help empower people to fight for their own rights and their own needs. So it is heartwarming. You're right, when these folks get to enjoy or participate in these things for the first time, and to know that we're a part of this big, broad movement happening everywhere.
Absolutely. And I think 10 years from now, you're going to see an uptick in the number of trans lawyers that we see in this state. Just the
Oh,
sheer
that's
amount of trans youth telling me they're interested in becoming lawyers and getting good at policy, it's been amazing. So there will
awesome.
be consequences for our opponents for putting us through this. And I think it's going to be joyful.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Ash, I really appreciate you taking the time today. We really want to thank the ACLU of Texas and your team for everything you're doing, both fighting before the laws pass, but then also looking for ways to challenge them once they do. We really know that right now the wins are happening at the court level, and that's what's holding back this flood of some of the worst things. So thank you all for what you do, and thanks for taking the time.
Of course, we love you. Thanks for having me.
All right, let me throw Ash's information back up on the screen real quick, so folks can see that. Thank you, Ash, again. If folks want to connect with ACLU, there's their social media and website. All right, so next up, I want to pivot and let's sort of talk about sorry, there we go. Okay. Had to get all my right screens going. So I want to bring up our amazing panel of folks to talk about resources that are out there. But I first want to start with a business perspective. So I want to introduce Jeffrey Lawrenson, who I mentioned earlier is part of the NGLCC's TGX program and also works in corporate spaces as part of an employee resource group. So, Jeffrey, thank you for being here and agreeing to talk with us today. Um, I kind of want to do the same question that I started out with Ash, which is what are you hearing in the spaces you work, both here in Texas, but then sort of nationally as you've been a part of NGLCC? How are folks feeling and navigating the moment we're in right now?
Uh, I will also say thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with the Houston Chamber. To answer your question, I'd echo a lot of the same things that Ash said, which is there's a lot of confusion out there about um, the ability for people to be safe, for their ability to move around the country. Um, Being part of an ERG in a large corporation means I get to kind of see it from lots of different perspectives. And for employees, it's very much like, well, now I can't change my ID. What do I do? And oh, we're consolidating offices and I'd have to move to Texas. Am I going to be okay there? From the business perspective, it's, especially as a federal contractor, it's how do we still show support for this community while also maintaining our contracts with the federal government? What are the rules of the road, and how can we still support those queer folk who are in our organization? And then kind of a third perspective is for all the people who do this kind of work, who are, part of the chamber or nonprofits or ERGs or whatever it is, how do we navigate this space and how do we actually start doing the things that we know work but in this new landscape. And so it's a whirlwind, I will say, over the last year. The comment I hear most often is, "I'm tired. I'm just tired," and I get it. As somebody who works in this space every single day, the last year has been exhausting.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, you hit on something. I want to just sort of clarify for folks who may not work in this space to know that back at the beginning of this presidential administration in January, there were some executive orders that basically banned companies from what was labeled illegal DEI or diversity, equity, inclusion programs. We know that if the programs that companies have are compliant with the Civil Rights Act of 1965, those are technically not illegal just because the executive order may have deemed them so. But what the federal government can do is they can put caveats on contracts that they give to companies and basically say we won't give you money if you spend that money in certain ways. So to your point about companies right now are having to thread this needle and navigate this really complicated space is for some of them a whole portion, maybe a quarter of all their income that they do is federal contract work. And if the government is saying we don't want you to have diversity programs, those companies are having to decide, do we lose these giant contracts or do we do away with the programming that we've believed in and supported for many years for our employees? And that puts folks in employee resource groups in a really tight place, having to navigate this tension point, right? Um,
Yeah, if I can just maybe click on that for a hot second,
yeah,
it's I think that the initial knee-jerk reaction was that binary choice of, do we lose these contracts or do we cancel these programs? I think over time, as more interpretations of those EOs started coming out, as more people started looking at them, that question's kind of shifted in a way of, well, we still have queer employees and we still have employees with queer family members. How do we make sure that they understand they're safe at work, that we value them as employees, and that they're supported here in the workplace? And that's really the difficult question to turn on. The reason I say that is because in my experience over the last year, what I've seen is the employers wanting to support queer people in these spaces. That desire has not gone away. It has thrown a big question mark on the how.
yeah. How do you show support when maybe
Right.
your hands are
How do
tied?
you show support, especially when you have to go in front of an administration that's hostile to these kind of things,
Mhm. We've seen
for
many companies
your
pull
business?
stuff off websites, right?
Yep.
So if you have to kind of go stealth and quiet with it, do employees still know that those programs are there,
Right.
right? So for the employee resource groups that are still there and functioning, what what roles do you think they can play in having conversations both employee to employee or within sort of their companies to say, hold the line. We need this and we need to hear you say that we're welcome and we belong here.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think all the ERG leaders that I've spoken with across basically the country, not that I've talked to all of them by any means, has been largely the same. Number one is, as an ERG, one of our jobs is to tell management what the queer community needs at this moment. And sometimes we have to face the fact that we work for businesses, we don't work for nonprofits, and businesses have to make profit. So that's really reimagining with management what it looks like to support the queer community. So if you can't have a flag up on your website anymore, okay, that's sad. It breaks my heart. I don't like it. But what can we do? If you have to change some of the wording on your website, that's sad and a silly exercise. But what do you change it to? Part of it is that. The other part of it is also part of our job as ERGs is to help our fellow employees. And our fellow employees are scared, they lack information, they lack context, and they oftentimes don't know what what to do in certain scenarios. And that's where ERGs, at least my ERG and a number of the ones I've talked to, have spent a lot of time focusing. Is if you come to me and say, hey, I'm trans and I'm about to transition in the workplace, what can we do to help that and ease that transition as you're going through? We had a lot more tools available to us before. We have a lot less now, so that's more of a thicket patch than it used to be, but we can still offer support and guidance and advice in that space to alleviate that. And so that's yet another thing that that we have to do. And then you fall onto the base business, so to speak, of what ERGs do, which is we develop our employees to be the best employees they can be for our companies. And so we've got that running in the background of how do we make sure we keep that mission alive without running afoul of things that would put the business at risk. But those three buckets is really where I see a lot of ERGs working right now is how do we provide the support that our employees need while helping management address this bad situation, but a situation that won't change for some time.
Yeah, and what we're sort of talking about is there's two places. One is the stuff that is happening within a company, right? The DEI orders, the contracts, the changes to diversity programming. That storm is happening within your company. But then you also have the storm happening outside the company, which is a lot of what Ash spoke about, which is when someone leaves work, maybe they have an inclusive restroom policy at the company headquarters, but then they drive down the street, will they still be able to navigate the airport and other places we talked about that are now impacted by the state law? And, is their identity document, which, they have their ID card that has the right name and pronouns on their ID card for work, but maybe their driver's license doesn't. And now they're having to deal with sort of that mismatched documentation, right? So you all are having to try and help both support them off campus and on campus, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of what I mean by ERGs kind of being in the middle of all that, right? Is nobody goes to work and forgets that their personal life exists. But that's where, again, we can step in and tell management, hey, by the way, Jeffrey's trans, and she is worried about whether or not Texas is going to make her medicine illegal, or she now has to wander through this forest of chaos about her passport and driver's license and birth certificate. And, sitting in the middle of that, we can be the translators, we can be the facilitators to bridge that gap. A lot of our management and the management in a lot of other companies are not trans. A lot of them are not queer. So they don't understand the context of this, that walking into the day at 8 a.m. here at work, I've already shouldered about 3 days worth of stress just in the few hours I've been awake. And so bringing that to light to them, and then saying these are the kinds of things that we need to support our employees with is right in our wheelhouse.
Yeah. Now let me just pivot quickly because I do want to just hit on NGLCC and what they
Yeah.
focus on, because there are this TGX program that exists that if you're a transgender or non-binary business owner, let me try to get all that out. I'm sorry. And an entrepreneur, like there are resources and support for you if you are a business owner. So what is NGLCC doing in many ways to sort of help in this moment?
Yeah, so we had a strategy refresh last year and it kind of got kicked around a little bit this year, but I would say it's really in three buckets. Number one, for LGBTBEs that happen to be TGX owned. I'm gonna read a little bit here because I not actually read, but because I don't want to get it wrong. We're really looking to make sure that those LGBTBEs have mentoring opportunities, that there's education programs for them to learn how to navigate things like corporate procurement systems that require documents like your birth certificate or banking documents that may have you misgendered on there. And then really providing a venue in which they can talk amongst themselves in order to figure out how to do business better, right? from the lens of being trans or gender expansive. But the flip side of that coin is we also need to teach corporations how to interact with trans people better in the course of business. And so that's another one of the things that the TGXI is looking at in the next year is how do we teach corporates how to be better partners in that space? And then lastly, just because I know we're running short on time, is then looking across all the affiliate chambers, of which Houston is one, and seeing all the ways that they are supporting their respective TGX communities. Houston has one of the largest trans communities in the nation. So what are they doing well? And what are the other affiliate chambers doing well? And how do we spread that across so that all those LGBTs have a really good starting point in which to base their careers off of?
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, so stay put. I'm going to bring on Mandy and Stephanie Nicole now to also add to the conversation. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for being here. And as Jeffrey mentioned, uh, there's there's a need for resources out there, um, but there's also this sort of opportunity. There are really great things happening in our communities. People are not alone. There are resources for folks to turn to, but people may not know. Um, and in some ways, our community is sort of like no one's coming to save us, but we're going to save ourselves and we're going to support each other. We're going to rally around. So, um, let me ask, Stephanie, what are you hearing from your clients and the people that you interact with at the Montrose Center? What are our local, trans and non-binary folks telling you?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And thank you to the Chamber for inviting me here and inviting the Montrose Center. Yeah, so I'm the Director of Social Services, so I oversee our trans wellness program as well as our senior programming. So I interact with a wide range of folks, like in age, from young people to our elders who live here at the Law Harrington Senior Living Complex, which is a LGBTQ affirming affordable living for people who are 62 and older. And we do have a not insignificant amount of a number of trans elders who live here. So from them, I'm hearing that it's hard to make rent. A lot of them had not stable careers, like just maybe because of their gender identity or because of other issues. And now that they're older, it's getting even harder. I know that Kel is on this call, who is with the city now, and who is going to help us out with addressing those kind of issues with our seniors and with our youth. And with our youth, what I hear from them, specifically with the Trans Wellness Program, is that they're looking for community. And they're also looking for those basic necessities too. A lot of them are insecurely housed. They tell us that they're being rejected by their families, by their communities. When they reach out to us, some of the first things that they ask for, if it's not food or housing, I just want to know where people like me are at. Where can I find friends? Where can I find people who are not going to judge me for the way that I look or don't look? Thankfully, the Montrose Center has a very big space. So we have a community center on our first floor where it's free or very low cost especially for members in our community. We have a lot of trans identified organizations that meet there. So there are a lot of opportunities for people to meet in person because I know that's very important, but we also have virtual meetings for people to join of all ages. So that's what I'm hearing is a lot of fear too. I know that Ash spoke about the laws and the confusion around that. A lot of people are very confused about what's going on. But there's also a lot of joy and a lot of intentional resilience. Just this past Saturday, the Montrose Center, along with the Rothko Chapel, sponsored the first Revolution of Joy Festival that was co-curated by trans activists Ethan Michelle Gans and Javon Martin. And yeah, it was a very intentional space to celebrate trans artists and trans arts. And it was the first one, so we didn't know what to expect, but I think that there were, if I had to guess, I think there were maybe like 50 people there. And there wasn't a ton of notice, but I think that's just a testament to people just really want to be in a space where they can be celebrated and not be so overcome with the heaviness that is out there right now.
Yeah, we feel that a lot at the chamber that people are just really seeking community, and so a lot of our events have been higher attendance than we may have seen in the past, and a lot of times folks just really just need to be together right now. Um, Mandy, I'd love to bring your voice in. You know, you're an example of an amazing affirming parent, someone who isn't um, a part of our community, but you are a part of our community, right? Because of your love for your child and because of the work you do. So, how, as you're hearing these feelings that folks have been expressing, how do you, as an ally, both validate those feelings, but then also try to be a voice of comfort and support and provide resources so that folks don't just spin without the sort of support that's out there?
Oh, good question, because there's a lot of spinning right now. The number one way that I help parents right now is just to let them know they're not alone. And we've been talking about that a little bit about finding community and being together, because right now it can be really lonely to be the parent of a trans kid in Texas, because kind of depending on where you live, what environment you're in, it's not 100% safe to be visibly, loudly proud of your kid. So it can be hard to connect with or even find other parents and caregivers. So when I meet with parents in our Houston support group at the Montrose Center, or individually online, or even in our online community, I try to let them know that whatever they're feeling is valid and common and normal, and that there are a lot of other affirming and supportive parents of trans kids in Texas. And I let them know that they're doing the right thing by affirming and supporting their kids. And then the next step would be to connect them with resources. If they're looking for support and answers about parenting a trans kiddo, it can be hard to know who to trust, and even what information to believe or how to decipher it. Like, all these laws and policies and directives and orders that we've been talking about are really hard for the average citizen to understand. Like we said, I mean, we had Ash come in and help explain it to us. So there's a lot of fear and confusion out there, not only for LGBTQ folks, but their families as well. So I work hard to curate those resources for families. I certainly don't have the answers to everything, but most of the time I know who does. And so I help people find accurate, helpful information about politics or policy, or how to support their kids or even themselves. And that could be anything from learning more about gender diversity so they can understand their kids better, or even organizations that can help them navigate finding healthcare for their kids. So just to help them just not feel alone and find that community and everybody to help each other.
Thank you. Stephanie, tell me a little bit more about like the trans wellness program or even just the general mental health programs that the Montrose Center offers. You mentioned the space, you mentioned the senior programs, but there's some really great things that you all do around health and wellness, and I just want to sort of lift that up in the space.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, the Trans Wellness Program is, I think, like many programs, is a work in progress. We're kind of figuring out how best to serve the community. And I also want to point out that the community means a lot of the people, not a lot, but there are a number of trans and non-binary people who work at the Montrose Center. Avery Bellew is our CEO, who is a trans woman. So when we are talking about these things, when we're at the Montrose Center, like, we're talking about ourselves and we're talking about our staff. So it's always always at the top of our mind when it's not a theoretical for us. It's not like just stories. Like, there are people here who are in danger. We have had staff members who have left the state because they did not feel safe here, either for themselves or for their partners. Like Mandy was saying, like, if your family member is not safe, then you're not safe And so the Trans Wellness Program, it's designed to be a one-stop shop for resources for trans individuals. Like I said, we get a lot of emails from people who are just looking for either community, or they're looking for help to, like, how do I even transition? How do I medically transition? How do I do it legally? So we have a resource list for, safe doctors and safe attorneys who we could point people to, since we can't do that in-house yet. But that is the goal, to be able to do stuff like that for our community. But at this time, we try to keep a running list, and we check in with people to make sure that they're still safe for our community. The counseling services, we have a wide range of counseling services. So it's best to, get in touch with our front desk and see, what you qualify for. There's I couldn't even name all of the federal grants that we have that our team is very intentional about seeking out so that we can provide these services. Sometimes at no cost, sometimes at a very low cost, but we work with people because we know how important mental health and how much case management is very important to everybody in our community. And I think trans people right now are especially vulnerable. And like I said, Avery recognizes that as a trans person herself, and just as somebody who has worked in social services for as long as she has. And for the Trans Wellness Program, our biggest event is coming up. So we have our Transgender Thanksgiving, or Tea Giving, on November 25th. And that's where we're going to welcome anywhere from 250 to 300 trans people and allies to just come and be in community with each other. I've been working in this kind of space for a while, and I know that free food will bring people out. So that's what we're doing. It's a free meal. We'll have vegan options. I'm vegan, so I'm not making fun. But we have people of all dietary preferences. We're trying to hit everybody. But that's what we want. We want the Trans Wellness Program to be a resource space, but also a space where you can just come and unload your burdens and be in community with each other.
That's great. And Mandy, tell us a little bit more about those programs you're offering. Specifically, I know you mentioned the online resources, but tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. So we are based in Houston and focus on Texas because there's a lot to focus on in Texas right now. And we serve families all over the country. So yeah, I'm most excited about the online community for parents. It is as safe and as locked down and vetted as possible. We've got about 100 parents in there right now from 28 states that are supporting each other and creating connections and have live events, discussion spaces. And it's just really amazing to see parents connecting with each other and helping each other. We also host a monthly in-person support group at the Montrose Center, an introductory online course for parents, tons of educational content on social media, twice weekly newsletter. And then we also participate in a lot of collaborations and then a lot of local and state advocacy for trans rights and equality.
All right. Well, we are running short on time, so I'm going to condense this next question. We did entitle this "The Workplaces Matter." So I do want to mention, first of all, that, companies that, whether you have 3 employees or 3,000 employees, companies can take time now, since they are private employers, to reassess what kind of facilities and inclusive spaces they have at their workplaces. If you're a public facing restaurant or coffee shop or, facility, you could be a safe space for someone to come and use the facilities, if they're going to be turned away from a facility down the street, right? So think about what you all, and even a small business, can be doing to create safe spaces for trans and non-binary folks right now. But for those of you on the panel, if you'd like to answer, what can companies do to support your work and your efforts right now, especially if they're an ERG group listening? What are some ways that they can support you? And I'll just throw it out.
I'll start. I'm loud and opinionated, so I don't mind. I think it depends on the size. Me as a trans woman navigating through the world, just seeing a pride flag in the window tells me I can go in there and nobody's gonna bug me. So I don't think it has to be a huge, major lift. If you are in a large corporation and you have an ERG and you have resources available to you, I again, from my own personal opinion, it would be, tell me how to navigate. tell me how to get there. Make that load that I'm carrying in at 8 o'clock in the morning a little bit lighter. You don't have to take the whole thing. You're not going to be able to, but make it a little bit easier for me to navigate my day.
And that's what allies can do for trans folks, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Mandy, I see you came off mute.
Yes, I would love to see business leaders be unapologetically clear about their support for the trans community and their trans employees. And that could look like in a lot of different ways. And I think we've discussed a lot of that. Um, it would be really great to be visible and vocal against the anti-trans legislation that is just comes up every 2 years like clockwork. And I know there's some restrictions on certain things. We've been talking about that, but to let our lawmakers know that discrimination is bad for business. It's bad for our state economy. Um, yeah, just be loud. And we need allies to be speaking up right now.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Mandy. Be loud and come volunteer with us. That would show the people in the community that you really care. Yeah, the Mantra Center, we need, I know Kevin Wynn is our community engagement coordinator, director, and he wants me to say we need volunteers. We have a really great staff here, obviously, but volunteers really make our ship run a lot smoother. That's you coming in to help us serve lunch daily to the seniors. You could volunteer at tea giving. But also you could sponsor a meal if you can't come out physically. I know our youth, they meet weekly, and a few pizzas go a long way to show your support. And also, like I said, food is really a great unifier. And I know there are a couple of food drives going on right now. At Pearl, you can drop off non-perishable through tomorrow. We'll have a few more food drives, but you could host a food drive too at your business or wherever you're at in your community, and drop that stuff off to us. So volunteer, please.
Awesome. And 30 seconds each. What's something giving you hope right now?
The youth. It is one of my greatest joys to see high schoolers yelling at school board members during school board meetings and like using their voices. It is so incredibly just inspiring, and to know that that's who's going to be in power soon, and we're going to see the tide change.
For me, it's for as loud as the other side is right now with their bullhorn, I've had at least 3 times as many people come up to me and say, "Hey, this is wrong. We know it's wrong. What can we do to help?" That's what's giving me hope.
Yeah, not to be a brown noser, but I think this panel is giving me a lot of hope. Brian, I'm really thankful that you reached out and that you put this together. It's really nice to know that the people in the business community and people at the chamber are thinking about this, and being very intentional about coming together for our community. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Real quickly in closing, I know we are at time, but I do want to highlight that there's a number of events happening in Houston in the next few weeks. Um, uh, the Mahogany Project is actually hosting a Black Trans Empowerment Week, and their first event is at Sesh member or chamber member Sesh Co-working. So check out their opening ceremony and their day of rest. So just check out the Mahogany Project on social media. Also, the NGLCC will be hosting a webinar on Trans Day of Remembrance. And then also, there are several events here locally. Mandy will be speaking at an event that Katie Pride is hosting on November 20th at 6. There'll also be a virtual event that Pride Houston 365 is hosting. And Save Our Sisters United is hosting a Rain in Paradise memorial event that will run for several hours, both virtually and in person. All those are on Transgender Day of Remembrance. And then afterward, you've got tea giving at the Montrose Center that they mentioned. And Trans Men Empowerment Group is hosting a karaoke and fun event on November 28th at Axelrad, which is another chamber member. So all across our network, there's a number of really great things happening to sort of help celebrate and acknowledge the Day of Remembrance and also the resilience of our community. So, in closing, thank you to our Workplace Alliance sponsors, ExxonMobil, HEB, and HP. These are three companies that are actually showing up with their money and supporting our organization, not just on Pride Month, but throughout the year. If other organizations on the call are interested in sponsoring these types of programs, please do feel free to reach out to me. And in closing, for all of our chamber members, but particularly our impact partners, I'm always available to answer any questions you may have. So thank you all again to our panelists for being here today. Jeffrey, Mandy, Stephanie, Ash, thank you each for your thoughts and for being willing to share your input with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We really appreciate you all, and we will say goodbye since it's 1:03. Bye, y'all.